leaders. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you 3 young leaders who will be engaging in a reflection panel. As seen in the meeting objectives, the work of building a culture of health and advancing health equity is multi-sectoral, but also multi-generational. We invite these youth leaders to share their knowledge and experiences in a conversation. We are joined today by Aaron Lewis, who is a junior at Friary Charter School and a teen employee at the warehouse in Wilmington, Delaware. Aaron has been employed with the warehouse for 18 months and is a rising peer leader focused on creating opportunities and space for new team members to feel fully immersed in the warehouse experience. Aaron also enjoys cheerleading and track and is one of the most vibrant youth voices at the warehouse. We're also joined by Shyvana Underwood, who is a human services professional who works with the behavioral health team of her tribe, the Quinault people, as an administrative assistant. She is also the vice president of the Quinault Indian Nation Culture Committee, while she is also the secretary of the Quinault Canoe Society. Shyvana is trained in Question, Persuade, Refer, or QPR, for suicide prevention and believes in implementing traditional coping mechanisms for intergenerational trauma. She is a graduate from the Institute for a Democratic Future and strives to develop strong policies that benefit her community as a whole. She has a degree in human services from Gray Harbor College and is currently a full-time student at Evergreen State College, majoring in Indigenous Studies, focusing on healing from trauma. And finally, we have Andrea Vega, who is a community organizer from Rancho Cucamonga, California. She graduated from California State University, Northridge, with a bachelor's in political science, and since then has been dedicated to grassroots political organizing, both on the local and national levels. She previously worked on the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign and is currently a campaigns fellow with Voto Latino. Melody, I'll turn it over to you to lead this session with our engaging youth leaders.
Thank you so much, Ivory. And it is a pleasure to be able to facilitate this portion of the program with these wonderful young leaders. So, Shyvana, Andrea, and Aaron, I hope that you all are ready for some very impactful questions. With that being said, I believe I'm going to go with Andrea first. And the first question to you, Andrea, is why have health inequities persisted, though there have been efforts to eliminate them?
That's definitely an excellent question. A lot of the efforts, just some background. I'm from California. So I specifically live in San Bernardino County. It's a county just right below Los Angeles County. It doesn't really get a lot of spotlight compared to like LA or the Bay Area. And a lot of the efforts that I've seen locally to really combat the various inequities that we see comes a lot from local community organizing, a lot of local efforts, and sadly not enough attention really being given from the vast majority of elected officials that we have, whether it be on the state level or whether it be on the local level. So there's still just a lot of struggle in really getting, whether it be members of the governor's office or city councils to really start combating we've seen recently with the COVID pandemic. The region that I live in is predominantly Latino, predominantly working class. So of course, when the lockdown orders first came up in March, a lot of people's biggest concerns, aside from, of course, being able to survive just, health-wise this pandemic, was also, well, how am I going to survive economically? Rent is still due. So we saw that a lot of community leaders really came together, were really pushing for, let's put a freeze on things like mortgages, things like rent. And our county board of supervisors, a lot of the city councils, they just weren't budging. So for a lot of it, it has to where the people who are supposed to really protect our best interests, the people that we've put into power, the people that we've even campaigned for, just aren't doing that follow through, then community has to come in and create, whether it be like rent relief programs or food banks. So it's kind of like we already know what the issues are. We know what we need to help us. We're just kind of waiting for somebody to really, not waiting, but really demanding that someone really listen and really, engage in what we need, to the ability that we can only do so much. There are people with more power, more resources, that we'd like to really see step up.
Thank you so much for that, Andrea. That was spot on and very impactful. You made a lot of very valid points, so thank you for that. The next question I have is going to go to Erin Lewis. And Erin, how do communities identify priorities and address those priority areas so that all community members are included? Specifically, how can youth be included in these initiatives?
So I know with me, well, with Reach Riverside, I would personally say like better housing, education, access to healthcare, and a lot of them know are included, because they don't have like there's not like a lot of grocery stores or a lot of places that you can really go over like in the Riverside area. So yeah.
Erin, would you like to elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe about how in the Riverside area you have a lack of grocery stores. How do you think that affects one's health if you don't have good eating habits?
So like in the Riverside area, there's like a corner store. There's also a Popeyes, and I think it's like a couple other restaurants ahead of that. And they would normally like probably go to Popeyes every day or to the corner store every day, and that wouldn't be good for someone's health, especially like an elderly person or someone who has diabetes or something like that. So
Good points. Thank you, Erin. I was going to ask that same question to Shyvana in regard to, what or how do you believe communities identify priorities and how those priorities align with youth initiatives?
That's a really good question. So I live in a pretty small village. We're a fishing village, and I think food sovereignty is really important. We have a community garden where you can go and get fresh vegetables, fresh farm eggs from our chickens that we have. So I work for a health and wellness division, primarily in the mental health department. And I get to see firsthand all the hard work that we put into making sure individuals who have cancer, diabetes, mental illness, they have access to these things. They get food vouchers to grocery stores that will have healthier options for them. And we try to keep it local. So I think we really do try to focus on health, even though at times I feel like that's a privilege. Not everyone gets to have that, but it's a goal for everyone to have access to that someday. And I think Indigenous communities can really lead the charge on showing how we can do that, to use our resources to help have healthier resources.
Thank you, Shyvana. Excuse me. The next question, I'm going to go back to Andrea for this one. And I would say to you, Andrea, how do you believe communities and community organizations collect or gather the information to support their work? And what resources would allow communities to more effectively advocate for their priorities?
I'd say from what some of the local orgs that I've just collaborated with, done projects with, when it's come to community organizing here in California, we do use a lot of, one of the best tools is actually the data that we actually get from campaigns. So some organizations, if they have the resources to do so, we'll kind of transfer over when we're able to data that we take when we're out doing canvassing or even from phone banking efforts for local candidates or for statewide candidates. And then to build kind of this like deeper sense of community, we'll reconnect with those folks that we contacted, whether it be like 1 month or 5 or 6 months ago for, a state Senate campaign. Because at that point they're like, oh, so I remember talking to this group before. I kind of vaguely remember this person calling me and telling me like, don't forget to register to vote. So that helps to just like, we already have just like the first step of like kind of building a relationship with this person, especially if like, the person getting back to them is somebody who's just like only one town over or even within the same town as them. But yeah, a lot of canvassing, a lot of phone banking data when possible, because usually when we're talking to them, we're not just talking to them of like, oh, hey, by the way, there is, a special election city council race coming up a month from now. Are you registered to vote? Do you plan to vote? But we try to also just connect deeper on that with like, hey, what are some things that in your community you feel especially concerned about? I always like to do that, especially when it comes to, when I'm talking to folks who don't even participate at all in the electoral process. I'm like, well, there has to be a reason why you don't. So then I'll start that conversation with them. And then when we take back all of that and we're like, okay, well, today in this like, in today's canvas, what were some of the things that people heard about? Whether it be things like, hey, water quality is really bad, or there is food scarcity in this area, or, a big issue that's happening here in Southern California is the creation of like Amazon warehouses and other types of warehouses, which are causing extremely bad air quality, leading to higher rates of childhood asthma. And we get that a lot when we just talk to random voters that are within our area. So that's been a great way of us kind of taking that info and deciding like, okay, so these are the top, whether it be like top 5 concerns that we're hearing, especially this month when we're reaching out to folks. Where do we go from here? What is the best course of action? What are some community efforts that we can do? What are some things that we can do on the electoral level? What do folks really need? So that's been kind of the best way that we've been able to really gather and process a lot of data. Other things, we tend to look a lot at just what are some of the other like statistics that are being brought out by the state. Thankfully, the state of California is pretty good with monitoring things like whether it be like air quality, water quality, which is of course always really concerning in California because we always have issues with water running out and we always have issues with just high smog and poor air quality. So that's been what we've kind of had to rely on, aside from just like, so basically what we get from the state and what we get on our own when we're going through standard community engagement.
Thank you, Andrea. The next question I have is actually going to be for Aaron. And Aaron, this question is, how does technology like social media and data collection tools offer new opportunities and challenges?
Me personally, I would say it lets the people know what's going on in their community and how it can help them better their community. So to elaborate more on that, I would basically, it lets them know what what can help them get jobs or better their community in a good way, or to help the community be successful.
Great points. Shyvana, would you like to chime in on that in regard to that particular question as well, which was how does technology like social media and data collection tools offer new opportunities and challenges?
Yeah. Um, so it offers a lot of challenges, especially during COVID. All of our kids, most of our staff are all working from home. So we have to have a good connection, and we don't have that here. We're very secluded from any major cities. We're very far from really anything. So it has created a lot of obstacles for us, and it's something we were not prepared for. But it also benefits us in a way that we can still connect with people. Like here today, we get to connect with all of you wonderful people and discuss really important issues. But not having access to technology, I think, is just another way that we have to really strategize a plan and be more autonomous from like major companies. So working on having our own network to be able to have service, Wi-Fi, those are things we don't have here. I had to have my whole family leave today so that I can have better Wi-Fi. So that's just something that's an obstacle, but I think we can strategize a plan to have our own network.
Shyvana, I completely understand about network. I caught myself getting close to a window, so I would not have internet connection issues and still seem to have internet connection issues. So I completely understand. I actually am going to start with you and stay with you, Shyvana, if you don't mind, in regard to what is the plight of minority youth in shaping the discussion and topic of health disparities?
Yeah, that is a really big question. I think so there are 567 plus nations, tribal nations. So I always like to say that I can only speak for my community and my lived experiences. But the way we are leading is we are leading with a powerful and uplifting message that we're not our trauma. We're not our intergenerational trauma. We are healing. We are medicine. We are valuable knowledge. So I think we're leading in that way, that our traditional healing doesn't have to be validated by the white man. It's valid now. We should be able to bill for traditional healing and alternative coping mechanisms. So I think the way we are leading is we don't need the United States permission to heal. The ongoing genocide that comes in many different forms needs to come to a stop right now. And I think that's my answer for that.
Excellent answer, Shyvana. I was going to pose that same question to Andrea. Andrea, the question is, what is the plight of minority youth in shaping the discussion and topic of health disparities?
Oh, again, I was thinking on this. It's a very excellent question. I'd say a lot of it comes down to just accessibility, particularly in resources. I've seen with a lot of like other youth organizers, there's this kind of like, there's multiple barriers, especially when we look at like education. I've had like when I've worked with like volunteers, just this idea of like what they feel is somebody who's like, you know, can be the person who's like fighting to end inequities and inequalities, and they think like, oh, it has to be somebody with like, you know, super expert with like all of these degrees and resources, and it's like certainly not, because we need folks that, you know, come from various backgrounds, and just because you feel like you don't have that kind of like almost like ivory tower type of certification, doesn't mean that you're, you know, you should be barred from being able to be in a part of this fight and be in these discussions and have a seat at the table. That's especially what I'm seeing with like, you know, young Latino organizers, especially just having that balance of just, you know, participating and also, you know, trying to struggle and make a living. When I first entered, when I first started off organizing, just like out of college, in Southern California, I actually started off doing organizing with an org that was focused on labor organizing, particularly with folks that worked in Amazon warehouses. So with that experience of just like, these are folks that have very little hours in the day, and it's truly just difficult work. And going through that fight of just, you know, demanding labor rights, demanding fair pay, demanding, you know, healthcare access and benefits, which are still just, it's so difficult to, you know, go through that, especially if you work for like, you know, you're in a warehouse for a big corporation like Amazon, which is very unkind to workers. So, you know, to just kind of bring it back, it's realizing that, yeah, we have limited resources, but that gives you even more reason to just continue on in just fighting for this.
Andrea, that was excellent. Like that was I am so impressed with all of the young people I'm having an opportunity to speak with. So to round out our conversation, I have one last question for all three panelists. And that question is, what do you see as one of the most important barriers to health equity in your community? And what opportunities do you see in your community to address these barriers? So again, that is, what do you see as one of the most important barriers to health equity in your community? And what opportunities do you see in your community to address these barriers? And I will start with Erin.
So for me, I would say the challenge being presented by COVID-19 is that Black and Brown people are increasingly positive when tested at a higher rate than their non-minority. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, guys. Minority counterparts. The consistent racial equality. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Equity protests that taken place across the nation has challenged all of us to be very mindful and more aware of our biases while also trying to remain socially distanced during protests, which are needed. Yes, and it's evidenced by the amount of young people protesting and fighting for racial equality while testing positive for COVID-19 themselves.
Wow, Erin, that was really good. I love how you tied in the barriers of COVID-19 that our communities are facing, along with the ability of a lot of our young people who have been protesting, because that has definitely been a tricky dynamic this year. So thank you for sharing that. I'll go to Shyvana. Shyvana, the same question for you and Andrea to wrap us up. And just let me know if I need to repeat the question.
Okay, so the biggest barriers is such a big question. There are so many, but I am going to go with the answer that I always give when I get this kind of question is I think the biggest barrier is lack of resources and being able to treat trauma, because trauma from intergenerational trauma, like boarding school survivors, genocide survivors, that's something that Western medicine can't heal. And it's been a pattern of relying on the United States government for medication commodities, so unhealthy foods that our body was not made to consume, and then developing diseases like cancer and diabetes. So it is lack of resources and the all-around entities of inequity in our communities. We have no doctors that are like permanently here, so we have lack of doctors. We're trying to get better at having those resources available to people. So we're getting it going, and I want to leave that on a positive note that there are some amazing people working to fix that issue, the lack of resources issue. And it's slowly but surely happening with younger generations using their voices, like the ones who are on the panel with me today. So I really commend you on all your work you're doing and your powerful words.
Thank you, Shyvana. And we will end with Andrea with the same question.
Yeah, so very similarly to what Shyvana said, it comes down to a lot of lack of resources. You know, just right before the start of this panel, the governor of California had just issued another stay-at-home order. You know, just very much like an Amber Alert flashing on your phone, very just intimidating. And with a lot of the folks I know, you know, thankfully, I'm in a position where I am able to safely work from home. But a lot of family members I know, a lot of loved ones I have, they don't have that same ability. So they're very terrified of, well, are they simply just going to go on some kind of temporary break? Or are they gonna, you know, are they still going to have to come in to work and then risk, you know, getting COVID? Or are they going to be going, you know, are we going to be going through the same thing that we saw just earlier this year with a lot of layoffs? It's very, very terrifying. And without those kind of financial resources, that limits a lot of people for, if they do end up testing positive for COVID, how will they be able to overcome it if they are experiencing horrible symptoms and have to be hospitalized? Currently in San Bernardino County, we're at less than 15% of availability with hospital beds. And that's, you know, just dealing with COVID-19 in addition to just all of the other health issues that happen when you are in an environment where there is just extremely poor air quality, and you know, there are parts of the county that are dealing with intense food scarcity. So it's, you know, it's a lot of, that's definitely just one of the biggest barriers. It's one of the things that I always think about, like, when I'm talking to like other organizers and we bring up, like, you know, it's very expensive to be poor, especially in California where things are pretty pricey. So that has created just a very huge barrier, and we're really only seeing anything kind of being remedied kind of through a lot of community unity, which is really the thing that's been, you know, moving me forward, is seeing just community come together at, you know, some very unfortunate circumstances.
Thank you, Andrea. And I would just like to thank all of the panelists, Shyvana, Andrea, and Aaron. That was a very impactful conversation. I am just smiling because this group of young people and the work that you are doing in your respective communities is just powerful. With that being said, I'll turn it back to Ivory.
Thank you, Melody, for facilitating that conversation. And again, thank you to Shyvana, Aaron, and Andrea for your responses and your engagement.